So it has not been the prettiest past 2 weeks for the Packers, now heading into the playoffs against the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday. But I'll just sort of touch on what I think is one of the biggest problems with this Packers offense. And this is a group that has been one of the best in the NFL all season. Still top 10 in most categories, 8th in points per game, 5th in yards per play, 3rd in pass yards per play, 5th most rush yards per game. But the past 2 weeks, we have seen a completely different offense, an offense that in the game against Minnesota really struggled to get anything going until the final quarter, where they had a comeback, almost got back in range to win that game. But I think the biggest thing when we look at these past 2 weeks for the Packers is this is a team that likes to push the ball down the field at a very high rate. And I think having Christian Watson is one of the biggest reasons for that because of his size and speed combination. And so far this season, Christian Watson is 3rd in the NFL in yards per reception at 21.4. And when we look at the fact that now Christian Watson, believed to have a torn ACL, and he's not going to be here for the playoffs, this is going to be a Packers offense that has to find ways to continue to be explosive even without one of their most explosive players. And that's going to be hard to do just because there's no one on this Packers roster like Christian Watson. And so I just want to show you some stats here from Jordan Love the past 2 weeks and compare it to the first part of the season, weeks 1 through 16. But in weeks 17 and 18, which is the past 2 games, most of this is from the Vikings game because Jordan Love only played in 12 snaps in the game against the Bears before he went down with his injury. But in weeks 17 and 18, Jordan Love is 14th in deep pass percentage at 11.9%. And this is from fantasy points data. This is from quarterbacks who at least have 25 attempts, but 14th in deep pass percentage. If you look at weeks 1 through 16, Jordan Love is 2nd in deep pass percentage. The past 2 weeks, Jordan Love has not really been pushing the ball down the field at the same rate. I think part of that has to do with the fact that Christian Watson was absent from the Minnesota Vikings game. So the Packers lost their deep threat in that one. And then if we look at Jordan Love's yards per attempt, weeks 17 and 18, 17th, this is for the Packers overall. The Packers yards per attempt, weeks 17 and 18, it's 17th at 7.09. You look at weeks 1 through 16, 3rd in yards per attempt at 8.37. So this is an offense that the past 2 weeks has not looked like it has early on in the season. They're passing deep at a much lower rate, and they're not, having those explosive plays like they had for majority of the season early on. I mean, just from weeks 1 through 16. And I do think the biggest factor is Christian Watson no longer being here. He played in 8 snaps in that game against the Bears, but we missed him in the Vikings game. And so that's what the Packers have to figure out is how can they still get some of these explosive plays even without Christian Watson on the field. And that's the thing. It's not like you can just easily replace a guy like Christian Watson, which makes this, so challenging for this Packers offense. And so while a majority of the season, this has been one of the better offenses in the league, they do have some things to try to figure out heading into the game against Philadelphia. And another reason I think the Packers have struggled the past couple weeks, Jordan Love has not been very accurate. That has been something I would say he's struggled with all season. He's not the most consistently accurate quarterback, and he's talked about it in the past couple weeks. He's saying that that's an area where he needs to improve. But when we look at Jordan Love in the past few weeks, in weeks 17 and 18, he is 23rd in catchable throw percentage per fantasy points at 71.4%. But that's pretty much on par with where he's been all season. 22nd on the season in catchable throw percentage at 73.9%. And on the season, Jordan Love is 35th in accuracy percentage at 45.2%. So that has been a problem at times. Just Jordan Love not being the most consistently accurate quarterback. And he has done better at limiting those interceptions, but there's still times where he just doesn't really put the ball exactly where it needs to be. And I think one other thing with Jordan Love, it feels to me like we see a different Jordan Love when the Packers are trailing when we compare it to him early on in games to start games. You think of the Vikings game, he starts off slow, starts off shaky. In the second half there, when the Packers really need to put up points, he comes in, gets locked in, and has 2 insane drives. And it feels to me like it may be like a mindset kind of thing where early on in games, he's trying to be safer, not really throw interceptions. And then when you're down 2 scores and there's, 10 minutes left in the game, you have no choice but to, try to push the ball every single play. You can't, take a ton of checkdowns consistently when you're losing by 2 scores and there's, 7 minutes left on the clock. And so it feels to me like Jordan Love just plays much more free when he's down a couple of scores because he has to go in there and make things happen. And I do wonder if he's just thinking too much early on in games, being a little more hesitant, trying to play safe football and sort of focused on, not throwing picks instead of just sort of going out there and slinging it, letting loose. And that was, I think, a small concern early on in the season was that, Jordan Love was throwing a ton of interceptions. He has cleaned that up the past 8 or so weeks. But I do wonder at times if, the Packers trying to limit those interceptions, if it could potentially at times hold Jordan Love back just because he's not really going out there and sort of slinging it. I think he is very aware that he needs to not throw turnovers, which obviously you want from a quarterback. But I do wonder, is there a point where, he needs to be a little bit more loose and sort of play free? And so that's one reason I think there could be a positive of playing the Eagles in the first week here with the Packers struggling the past 2 weeks is I would say majority of people would say that the Packers aren't going to win this game just because, I've seen some guys today just in the NFL media say that they think the Eagles are the best team in the NFL. And so it does feel a little bit like last year with the Cowboys game. Now the Packers did have a lot more momentum going into that Dallas game. They had won a few games and the offense was playing well. And this time the offense has not looked good the past 2 weeks. But just for Jordan Love, it feels to me like he plays better when people don't expect quite as much. He just sort of goes out there and plays loose and plays free. And I think that's sort of the Jordan Love we need to see coming in this week. And then I think one of the final things here that has been an issue all year for the Packers, but also the past couple weeks, has been the drops. That's something that needs to get cleaned up. And so when you add those drops and you add the fact that Jordan Love has struggled with accuracy some this season, that just is something that can hold this Packers offense back. So there is a big question mark now without Christian Watson, how the Packers are going to try to, be able to get these explosive plays here. It's going to be tough, but I still do think that the Packers offense, if they play up to their potential, even with the guys they have, I think they can definitely go into Philadelphia and, put up a lot of points. Because, before these 2 games, the past 2 weeks, the Packers had 5 straight games of 30-plus points. And even in that Vikings game, even though it was a really, really bad start, the Packers did put up 25. So it's not like they're out here putting up 3 points. They put up 25 and 22. So it could be honestly much worse. The question for me is, will the Packers come out, play clean football? There's been so many fumbles with, the Jaden Reed fumble this past game, the Josh Jacobs fumble the week before, a lot of other penalties. The Packers just need to play a lot cleaner football. But I do think this has been a top-tier offense all year. Can they do it without Christian Watson? That's something we'll have to see against the Eagles. But I still think that there's a lot of things to be hopeful about. But if we see the Packers team we've seen the past couple of weeks on offense, it's not going to be enough. So hopefully we see them sort of turn the page a little bit and play better football against Philadelphia. But if you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe below, and I'll see you guys next time.